Hello and welcome to ArtShow. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Curlee Holton. Hey, Curlee, how are you today?
Very good. And yourself?
Great. I'm so happy to have you on the show today. I wanted to start off like I normally do. I want to share some pictures of yours so people get an idea, those people who don't know you get an idea of the kind of work that you do. So I wanted to start with this particular picture because I thought this was a great one for me. This was a stunner. Tell me a little bit about I'm curious about the process of this one.
Yeah, it's a reductive serigraph where you take a wood surface relief, not serigraph, but reductive woodcut,
Hmm.
and you print a color, what they call a virgin color, and then you cut away, and whatever you cut away, the color remains. So you're doing a reductive process. Picasso made it very popular in some of his portraits of his wife,
Hmm.
the sort of reductive woodcuts. And I use
So
it as a part of what I do. But this is titled Cycles of Life, and it's about moving through different cycles of life from one's maturation, one's passion, to one's organic nature, to one's twilight stage.
so this is 4 plates.
4 plates put together.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you consider these are monotypes. Uh, is this a unique, or are there additional prints using that same plate?
Additional prints, but because of the way I work as a printmaker, each piece that I print, even if it's an edition, has a unique quality to it because of the application of the ink, and I take some liberties with shifting the ink a little bit, maybe the focus of intensity of pressure on a certain area.
Hmm.
So none are exactly alike. I'm not so interested in my prints being replicas of each other. So they're all of a series, but they have unique qualities to them.
I do the same thing. I really like, kind of robbing the printmaking of its main purpose of making reproductions. And I actually feel that it's kind of like almost like using printmaking as a drawing process.
It is a tool, and I think it's interesting you use the term robbing. I think it as a term of betraying the possibility.
Right. Yeah. To hell
I'd
with
like
that.
to.
I'm doing what I
Yeah,
want. Right.
as an artist, I'm interested in what I don't do well. So I
Yeah.
do some drawing with my left hand. I'm right-handed, but I like to discover who I am through my less abilities. I think sometimes gifts and talents can obscure your real sense of self. So we have to be
Right.
careful about that.
Just kind of, this is a geeky question. Do you ever cancel your plates?
Oh yes, I do. I cancel them, cut them up. I have a young man that has been working with me about 16 years who
Huh?
prints with me, and I was visiting his newly purchased home. And on the wall was a plate of mine that I had canceled years ago with the studio, and he told me it was one of his prized possessions.
Surprise was that? Yeah,
Yeah, not
I can
only do
imagine
you
that.
cancel
Yeah.
them, you got to get rid of them because they
So
show up in
do
places.
you, after you cancel the plate, do you print a canceled proof?
I'll sometimes I have, but not as a standard practice. So we do an X with a
Right.
stylus, a needle, or we cut it. I
Yeah.
had actually interesting. I work with artists from Australia, and after I'd worked for maybe a year later, she had works on a website that actually had pieces from some of the canceled plates that I had. And I said,
Right.
"You don't have permission to use those in your work." So my images, pieces of my images, were showing up in her work.
Ta-da! Right.
Yeah,
So,
so no, you
so
got to ask me, can you do that? You just don't do it.
this piece is a little bit different, and
Yeah,
so it's ink and watercolor is what I'm
it's
looking
ink
at.
and watercolor. Yeah, I did a small edition of 25 as an etching,
Right.
and then I went in and I hand color each print. This
Okay.
is called Mother's Nature, and this is a tribute to my own mother.
Hmm.
And watching her have her long, glorious head of hair being groomed by a young female, and it was a ritual that I always was struck by. And
Yeah.
so this is why it's called Mother's Nature.
I selected this because I love the textures. You have that little bit of stippling and the cloud forms there and the waves. This one, it really kind of worked for me. But this one, I'm dying to hear you talk about. So if I'm guessing correctly, is this aqua tint with, is that sugar lift?
Yes, yes, I did these in Venice, Italy, as a
Yeah.
part of a project. It was during Venice Biennale. I was invited along with another other artist to do a tribute to Venice, and I chose Othello, a tribute to Othello the Moor. And I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to do a series reimagining Othello as not only as a person of color, but also its sensibilities, bringing sensibilities to the subject as a person of color. And you can see me, I do incorporate myself in my images. You'll see me in the background looking. And this is in the plaza in Venice, but this is the first piece in the series. There's 12 pieces to the series.
This is nice. And have you aside from being in Italy, have you ever shown these
Oh, I've
outside?
shown it. It's in museum collections. It's in the Folgers Shakespearean Museum in Washington D.C. and
Yeah,
other museums.
good.
Museum of Art and Bates College Museum of Art. But each piece in my work, each piece evolves. I don't do a set of necessarily final images. Ever as I do each piece, even though I have a tendency to work in series, each piece I add elements to it, either color or technique or texture. But all the plates were executed in Venice because I wanted some of the historical elements and qualities to be present.
Hmm.
The study at the Venice Museum of Armor, you can see some of the uh, swords and garments that they have worn during the presence of Othello in Venice.
Mm.
Actually, quite something. I had an occasion to visit the what they call the governor of Venice, which is the mayor, and he was standing on the balcony talking to a group of artists involved in the project, and pointed out one of the small castles as Othello's home. So
Really?
Othello is live in Venice, and we walk across the plaza San Marco, and people would say, "Ciao, Othello, Othello," you know. So it's interesting that it's a mythic figure that has a life in Venice.
Yeah. It's an absolutely wonderful print. So this is a little bit different, and I think this is later, isn't it?
This is later. Yeah, I started to incorporate doilies in my work, doilies that I collected from antique stores and some of my
Mm.
own from my mother, suggesting that there was a historical element operating in the making of the work that
Hmm.
wasn't me illustrating history. So the doilies are historical. And
Hmm.
I've gotten them from my students that have been Latin American and all over, and I incorporate them in the paintings and the portraits. And this is a woman that came to me in my dreams. And I do work that has something to do with my dreams that I have. And sometimes they're figures and objects, and I incorporate them in my work.
Have you always put the dreams within your work,
Yeah,
or is that?
I've always been sensitive to my dreams. I've always
Hmm.
thought my dreams were my body and my heart speaking to me. I
Hmm.
not always listened, but they speak to me. So dreams have been important to me, and they sometimes remove a lot of the conscious noise and compromises that we deal with socially because you're operating from an unconscious place. So a lot of truth is in the things that we don't see.
To me, this was striking because of the, well, two details. One was the texture in the hair, but then the patterning in the
Yes.
garment really sets that off for me. And then the eyes.
Before I added the hair, I actually did the underpainting of the garment in the background, and I sand it down.
Okay.
I do it in a high texture, and then I remove it. But
So
also,
is
her
this on
eyes
wood or canvas?
it's on a board, so it
Okay,
can
on
take
board.
a lot of punishment. One eye is
Yeah.
green, one eye is brown.
Okay. Yeah, it has that. It like
Yeah,
it wants to stare at me no matter where I
my
go.
grandmother actually had one green eye and one brown eye.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a great little tip to know. I like that. And then I saw this piece. So tell me about it.
Yeah, this is called Hands Up Nemus, and this is about doing two things: making a reference to the hands up to the Black Lives Matter movement and the young black males that were vulnerable to the not just the police, but to a part of America, citizens of America that just found the presence of the black body to be disturbing and wanted to
Hmm.
erase. And you can see a little blood stroke on his pocket. And when I did the original watercolor, it was actually my blood that was placed on there. But I did the
Really?
nemesis, which is the halo. And in researching the halo, you discover that the nemesis or the halo predated Christianity, that it was a sign
Oh yeah.
of a hero coming back into the village, an anointment of a certain kind of specialty. So I'm suggesting that this young man is heroic and has a value beyond his
Hmm.
body,
Hmm.
a meaning more significant, just as his pigment of his skin.
Yeah, that's that whole Sun Ra Egyptian.
That's great. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's there. And so this is it a life size? Is the figure life size or is it a little
No,
smaller?
this is the size is 22 by 30 sheet,
Okay.
not life size. So
Do you-
original watercolor with pencil, graphite, and then the gold leaf is added. But you can see that plane of blue, and I wanted to show that there's a reality inside that space and also outside that space.
that works.
Yeah.
Do you ever use models for this, or is this all invented?
Sometimes I use models. Yes, I use my grandchildren. I have a 18-year-old grandson. I have one that's 24 that I've used in my subject matter. Kids in the neighborhood, and then sometimes photographs that I've gathered through publications.
There's nothing quite like free models.
Yes, yes, yes.
So this is the last piece, and I'm eager to hear your thoughts on this because I got so many references coming in. I'll be honest, the first time I saw this, it made me think of Doc's Thrash.
Oh, sure, sure.
Just sort of the quality of the gradations and the silhouettes. But I doubt you were thinking of him on this piece, but
No, it
that's
wasn't. But you can imagine that his imagery and others are present in my kind of vocabulary of art. So it
yeah.
echoes and it comes through. This piece is called In Search of Memory. And the young man, who's actually my brother-in-law,
Hmm.
has schizophrenia, and oftentimes he can't remember a thought, and he'll work very hard to try to recall the memory.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to find that memory in his mind, that the thing he was supposed to do. And I did this because it was paying homage to that kind of loss of memory and the losing of his way and trying to recover it. And I found that some of the audience that I have who had elderly parents were really attracted to the piece because their parents were suffering from issues of memory loss.
Mm-hmm.
Would have you're supposed to do something. You just can't remember what that something is, and you think about it and you search to try to find a way. And he just couldn't remember the thought that he had.
I love this particular piece because I have an affinity for artwork that I need to keep coming back to.
Mm.
If you can describe it to me and my memory is, pretty much spot on, it kind of bores me. But it's got that quality that I need to revisit it. I need to, even just like the marks that you make there, the assured hand marks. It's an exquisite piece. I
Yeah, I think
really dig.
because of the many ways in which an audience reads a work of art. And I
Mm,
believe in intention. It's important for an artist to have an intention. You're speaking about something has
mhm,
moved you, something's inspired you, something has provoked you. And so you're trying to communicate that to your fellow human. So it's important to also get a reading of it from the audience, but also some ambiguity is important because I think there's a great deal of ambiguity in all things. And
mhm.
I'm not, like abstract expressionist sort of. I make it and you figure out what you think it is, and it can be anything you want it to be. I don't want it to be anything you want it to be. I want it to have
Mhm,
to point you in a direction of a thought of or concern.
mhm.
I'm trying to make that known as an artist, but also enough ambiguity that you can read into it things that I may not even always be so
Yeah,
conscious of, you know?
yeah, I see that. Well, I think that's probably why I was attracted to your work. It's got that really rich storyline in it, which not all artists care to even acknowledge sometimes.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I wanted to start where I always start with artists, at the beginning. Can you tell me what was your first memory of art? What was your first experience of
Well,
art?
I had an older brother who used to draw all the time, and I was intrigued by that. I used to stand and watch and look over his shoulder and watch him draw horses and
Hmm.
Abraham Lincoln and all of that. And of course, when I got to school, I would draw, and I had some gift. There were a number of our students in our class that were sort of routed into the art classes because we had some ability. But I
Hmm.
had no idea what it meant to be an artist until much later in life. But I did it, and the young girls were attracted to it, my fellow students, and so for dates it was really entertaining. You get a date, or I was running
Right.
track, So it's either track or art that was getting me the attention of young girls.
Usually that's musicians.
Yeah, yeah. So it was all right. It was okay. But you don't find, in my experience, the meaning of it till much later, where you
Yeah.
mature and you have an understanding about the role of an artist, not just the talent and ability to draw, because
Yeah.
a lot of people can draw and a lot of people can paint and have a natural ability. But it's not just that you can sing a song; it's what you sing the song. What is the song about?
Yeah.
I think that's important. Not that you just have a talent that you refine, but to what end? What is the goal?
Right.
That's really important to me.
So at what point, so speed me up a little bit. So you had, your brother was sort of an early influence,
Yeah.
but
So
at what point did you say, you know what, I think I want to pursue this for my life? What?
well, as I mentioned, I got recognized in junior high school and high school for it. You get the attention, you get out of classes, or you do some of the theater. You do some props for the theater. I remember I did the backdrops for HMS Pinafore. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
this is way back, man, in like 10th grade or something.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I don't know why it stayed in my consciousness, but so you do that and you win Scholastic Awards. So there's reinforcement, but you
Uh-huh.
still don't know what it is. And
Hmm.
I thought about this a little bit today because of in preparation, not real preparation, but sort of anticipating it. I was recommended by my high school teacher to go to a friend of hers who was a art director for a art company, and they produced wallpaper and things like this, and they liked artists to do the painting. So I went in with my little portfolio, and he said something to me that was really important. I didn't understand it.
Mm.
I was so intrigued by, an art director. I'd like to be an art director or something. He told me that, you're not really a commercial artist. You are a fine artist. When he looked
Hmm.
at my portfolio, what is a fine artist? Well, I was introduced to Picasso and Rembrandt, like
Right.
everyone is, but I had no notion about that. So it
Mm.
was after I got out, I was in the military, and uh, there was an art competition in the military. I got drafted during the end of Vietnam. So there
Okay.
was an competition. I submitted a piece and I won first prize. And I was brought to the attention of one of the commanders in the division who was responsible for the exhibition and said, look, I'm going to move you out of your unit to a special service department where you can help returning GIs from soldiers from Vietnam who had certain issues,
Hmm.
especially drug addiction and things like that. And you can work with them with art.
Hmm.
So, now the role of being an artist had begun to be defined by the world around me, not so much internally, but the world around me. But much later on, I became a manager at Ford Motor Company. After I got out of the Army, I got a job. I had a wife. I wanted to have,
Hmm.
traditional things. And I got a position at Ford Motor Company and became, over time, promoted to a supervisory position. But I was having such internal conflict with it.
Hmm.
And I realized that what I really want to do is do the art.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
began to take night classes, and I went to night school for 10 years, man, before I finally got my first degree.
Okay.
My teacher described me as a Ben Arrow, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Took a long time to get there.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, that was the
But hey,
benefit.
you did it, right?
I
Yeah.
did it,
Do you,
you bring
weird
maturity to
question. Do
do.
you do you still have any of those older works? Like
Oh, yes, I do. I
you
have
kept
works
you
all
kept
the way back to
everything.
the high school. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I was just organizing some of it not too long ago. And that's because of I worked with a lot of artists during my career because
Yeah.
of the making. And
Yeah.
I remember going into Richard Anaskevich artist. This was a very famous artist with the optical art,
Hmm.
a famous student of Joseph Albert. And did work with him, and I visited him at his home, and I went down into his archive, and he had this so organized. And the
Hmm.
first piece that he did as a teenager, I mean, maybe 10 years old or something.
Right.
So, and I mean, I never see anything organized like this.
Uh-huh.
So it was such an impression on me. And I did this also working with Faith Ringo, very similar as well, very organized. So I began to put my work together and went back to my drawings that I had and
Mhm.
watercolors from when I was 15 or 16 years old. So I have put that work together and
Good for
organized.
you.
Well, you never
You're
know
w-
what happens.
you're like light years ahead of so many artists if you can be organized. 'Cause I've met so many that are just
Oh, well,
higgledy
I've dealt with
piggledy.
that too. I've dealt with
Yeah.
that too. Because a lot
Yeah,
of
I mean,
artists out there,
luckily, I actually have mine digitized and
yes, yes,
with numbers and whatnot on it.
it's
So
important to do it. It's
kind
important
of
to do
getting through it. So,
those kind
um,
of life experiences matured me in a way that I saw the role of artist as being important,
mhm,
and that it allowed me to do a couple important things to express my personal opinion about being in the world,
mhm,
where, thinking about who I was in the world and negotiating that interior life and my external life. So it became very valuable to me in that regard. So me defining an artist is sometimes a little different. It's not just the activity; it's the purpose of the activity. That's
oh
important.
yeah, I completely agree, 100%. I had an opportunity where I knew quite a few artists, senior artists who have passed away, and to see what their estates do afterwards, and those who are organized have such a leg up
Oh,
on those who are
about
just
it.
have nothing. So
Yeah, I've
I,
watched it.
yeah, it's sad. So let me shift gears here for a second.
Sure.
I want to talk about your creative process. So when you're in your studio, I'm curious to know, do your ideas for the work come first? Are they paramount, or do you do like a lot of play? Does your work evolve as you're making?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's sort of complicated in the sense that it's not just always just um, an ideal that I might have or an inspiration. I come up sometimes with concerns that I have, themes that I have. For example, I just finished a series called "To Dance," the Song of Death. So to me, it was a discussion about death and how one can think about death and one's demise, especially given that we all share it, we all have this experience, but we don't talk about it. Every human has it, every family member has it, but we don't talk about it. So it's been important to me to talk about it with my children and my family and to think through it in my work. So the series is 10 pieces, and it's called The Song of Death. And it talks about it from a more emotional, not a morbid kind of way, but an emotionality, a sense of transition, a sense of surrender, a sense of letting go. It has a sort of Buddhist quality to it, if you
Mm-hmm.
will.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a theme that has been important to me, and I went through that series and completed that series. Each piece is done differently than the previous piece.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've done is done watercolors. First, I'll do a sketch and then a watercolor, and that is so that I can start thinking through the process. It's going to eventually be a print, and then I'll do a silk screen, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'll do a woodcut relief that is on top of the silk screen. Then I might add some more silk screen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Each time is shifting in color. Scale stays the same because I want to do it as a series and a portfolio, but it's 24 by 32. But the colors change, the palette, the sequence of printing changes, whether it's a relief, then the serigraph. So it evolves. Each piece
Mm-hmm.
is about my own deeper consciousness. So it's interesting that the use of the making of the work is a way in which I go through my dot pattern, not just a dot pattern, but my thinking pattern, my process. Some things can be purely emotional. I can be struck by something. For example, the series that came after that was called Innocence. I want to do something about innocence because I think we all are in pursuit of a sense of innocence. I don't care who we are. It can be a criminal, could be, I don't care. There's this ideal that if we can create a certain reality, we return to a certain innocence. And of course, it has biblical implications to it, but it's really about a seeking of innocence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And they say that we have these sacred wounds. There are 5 sacred wounds that we carry with us. And the goal is to address that wound, to recover and redeem yourself from that wound, to repair that wound. And that means you got to accept the suffering that comes with it. So
Mm-hmm.
my work has a lot to do with that process. So what I'm revealing to you as an artist is my work is driven by a personal desire to have a deeper sense of self and more wisdom in my living. And my work as an artist is the tool that I use to arrive at it. So I'm an artist. I'm probably more of a philosopher that uses artists to create and express my philosophies.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think You know, there are many examples of performers, singers that are really David Byrd. I mean, even
Mm,
Johnny Cash. These were all philosophers that use
hmm.
song to express that being in the world and their reflection on the world. So as
So
an
it
artist, it's driven by that.
it sounds to me like you have like your creative process, that you have these ideas that form into series, but then those ideas then kind of go through your methodology of
Yeah.
printmaking in order to come to conclusions.
But they may not last. I make
Right, of
two
course not.
pieces out of it and it's
Right.
gone.
Sometimes it's a disaster. Well, we have to talk afterwards because my last big artwork that I do, it was called Innocence. So
Yeah.
we got something to talk about. It's the Massacre of the Innocents at the PMA I was dealing with. So I also have a love of printmaking, and I'm curious to hear, what is it about the materials that you use that attracts you so much to working with?
Well, I think a couple of things. My father was a forger in the sense that he forged metal with heavy metal machines, and he would take metal rods and turn them into objects.
Mm.
And he would come home and he'd had these big burn marks on his big arms. And I said, can I ever get arms and hands like this? You know what I'm saying? So I was always struck by his satisfaction with the manipulation of material and
Uh,
the body's relationship to work and labor. And that was very important to him and also to my siblings as well. So printmaking is labor intensive,
mhm.
and it incorporates the body. And of course, you're making art, so it incorporates not only your mind, but your heart. So it brings all of this together in the transformational process. Put a plate, a 216-inch zinc plate through the press and pull out a work of art. So it's transformative, as
Mhm.
alchemy is a part of it. So I
Mhm.
love the physicality of it. I love the labor of it, the wood cuts. I love the smell of wood. I love the harshness, the injury that even comes with it.
Yeah, yeah.
I have
Mhm.
I have war wounds, from it. You know what I mean? So then, like the Germans would have a scar on
Right,
their.
right.
Oh, I just show
It's
my war wounds.
That's great for cocktail parties, you know.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
well, I got
Oh,
this
you
one
want
on
to
this
see this
series,
one?
right?
Oh, this one
Right.
happened. The plate, I etched it so severely that the edge was like a sharp blade, and it slipped
Uh-huh.
into my hand and cut my wrist. And I thought it was so hot. I'm looking at it, and my student is fainting, trying to get me, want me. I said, "No, look at that! Look at that!"
Yeah,
So it is. How do you engage the phenomena of living as an artist and through your
yeah.
practice?
I love printmaking because of the I was exposed to it early on, and I love the amount of the variety of mark making that you can do with printmaking always astounded me.
Oh yeah,
You
yeah.
know, that it's you think brush would be the ultimate tool, but no, the deep bites and the sugar lifts and aqua tints and whatnot, just I
Sure.
love those as
And it
tools.
requires a reverse thinking too,
Yes,
as you
yeah.
know, and that's intriguing because you construct an image and you deconstruct it and you reconstruct it again. So this taking things apart and
Hmm.
putting them together has always been attractive to me because I think if you take them apart, you can get to the very essence of it, the
Yeah,
bone speed of it.
yeah, yeah.
And I'm intrigued by getting to the truth of something.
Every time I look at a piece of art and I try to reverse analyze, figure out how it's made, because that's often a clue as to the content, the key to figuring
Absolutely.
out the actual work of art.
Yeah, you unpack it. Absolutely.
I love it. I'm going to be going back and looking more at your work after this conversation to unpack some stuff. So I have time for just, unfortunately, one more question. I got
Sure.
50 more now, but just one more. So this is a question I ask everybody. Simple question: what does making art do for you?
There's a great part of a Bob Marley song where he says, "Only song I have is my redemption song." So my work is my redemption. My work is how to become wiser in my living and to repair any damage that has occurred in my life, either by accident or by design, to address the wounds that I've suffered, which we all suffer as living humans. It's not like something was done to me, but the wounds that we suffer. And if I think the work, I feel so blessed and fortunate that I have a way in which I can interface with myself, that I can have dialogue. So
Mm-hmm.
the most important dialogue in truth is with myself. Now I have audience and people look at my work and acquire the work, but it's not the priority for me. It's not the top motive for me. It's not, if I've taught for many years, and I think that what the teaching did for me is remove the financial pressure,
Mm-hmm.
of course, of needing to have income from practice as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lot of sort of a liberty. There's a high price for that. Don't misunderstand me, but you have liberty, and I
Mm-hmm.
think the ability to practice and to ponder who I am and the choices that I make and my family and giving a reflection to them of their choices, their reality is important. And I've often said it's more important to me. My grandchild walks in my studio and says, "That's what Papa thinks," more than a critic from the New York Times.
Right. Oh, of
That's
course. Yeah.
Papa thinks, because it's important that my children know that it's important and valuable for them to think about their world and their reality and to express it.
Mm-hmm. I can see that in your work. I mean, I can see
That's the project.
the effort that goes into it. I this is a weird thing, but I once lived with back in school. A friend of mine was a woodworker, and I was asking him about furniture once, and he told me the greatest. It's always stuck with me. I said, "How do you judge a good piece of furniture?" He said, "Well, the first thing you do is you wait 100 years, and then if it survives that, then you can start to talk about it." And then I started to think about how art can be like that too. Like, can it last? Is somebody going to take care of it for 100 years? Which obviously your work is going to last that way.
And
So
if the thinking of it, the concept behind it can survive time and transcend your particular
yeah,
cultural or personal background and touches a more universal background. I was in Oaxaca, Mexico, and I had a chance to meet Francisco Toledo and have dinner with him, just the most famous Mexican artist. And he asked me what was my project. And I told him some little stupid answer. Well, oh, I'm working about artists in Oaxaca and patterns.
right,
What is your project?
right.
Your real project is about.
Yeah, wow.
And
I
I
would have loved to
forgot
have been a
that.
fly on the wall for that
Yeah, I
one.
never forgot that he asked that question. I have a project. My work is the project. My work is to sing my song, to dream my dream, no one else's. And I'm able to sustain my family and my practice without compromising
Well, that's fantastic. So now I have like 50 more questions for you,
that.
but unfortunately, time is short on this. So I can't thank you enough for spending some time with me today to talk about your work and your background. I learned so much doing these kind of things, and I did definitely
Really
with you.
great that
And I
you
want to
did.
thank everybody else who tuned in today. Thank you for subscribing and liking to ArtShow. If you have any questions, you can always put them in the comment section, and I'll try to pass them along to Curlee if I can't figure it out myself. But again, thank you very much. It's been a delight talking to you today.
Thank you so much as
Thank
well.
you. Take care.